Hey guys, tonight we step into a place where silence is a lie, where the walls breathe, and where the echoes of broken minds don't fade with time. They multiply. You don't know your name anymore, not because you forgot it, but because no one's asked. The rain is falling sideways as you arrive, cold needles prickle your coatless back, and the sky looks like it's been held upside down and wrung out. A man in a lopsided tricorn hat unlocks the gate with the casual indifference of someone winding a clock. You try to ask him a question, but he just gestures. Inside. Now. The iron doors groan shut behind you, like they've done this 1,000 times. They have. The floor smells of wet straw and something else. Sharper. Metallic. The kind of smell that usually means someone's bleeding, or something recently stopped breathing. Welcome to Bethlehem Royal Hospital. The locals call it Bedlam. And tonight, it's where you sleep. If this sleepy scroll through the past brought you peace, a like and a sub would mean a lot. Drop your location and local time in the comments too. Curious how far and wide we're dreaming tonight. Now breathe in. Let the doors shut behind your mind. And let the story begin. You are not led to a room. That's too generous. You're put in a cell, and that's not an exaggeration. Bare walls, wood plank bed, one rough wool blanket that's still damp from whoever had it last. It smells like vinegar, mildew, and skin. Human skin. The keeper locks the bolt, and that's that. No pillow, no fire. Just the torchlit corridor beyond the bars and the rhythmic clank of boots walking past. They call this a hospital, but it doesn't feel like healing lives here. It feels like the place healing comes to die. Somewhere down the hall, someone starts screaming. Not like they're in pain, more like they're being remembered by something they were trying to forget. The cry is raw, like someone peeling bark from their own throat. You hear laughter next, not joyful. Not even unhinged. It's curious, measured, like someone experimenting with what it means to sound human. And then, like a curtain closing, everything goes quiet. It's in that silence that you start to feel the weight of the place, not just on your chest, but in your teeth. The whole building hums with dampness and time. It tilts, ever so slightly, like it's listening. You shift your weight. The bed creaks. A voice responds from the next cell, soft and hoarse. Don't move too much. They'll think you're planning something. You want to respond, but before you can, a second voice chimes in. This one louder, less coherent. We're all planning something. The worms are planning too. Great. It's going to be a long night. Hours pass. You don't sleep. Not really. Just drift in and out like a candle guttering in wind. Every time you close your eyes, something new invades the silence. A cough, a sob, the sound of something heavy being dragged. You catch glimpses through the bars when the torchlight flares, thin limbs curled in corners, bald heads nodding violently to music that isn't playing. One man sits upright, eyes wide open, whispering apologies to a handkerchief. By morning, or what passes for it in this perpetual twilight, you're exhausted. A keeper unlatches the door. He doesn't speak, just tosses you a gray tunic and gestures again. You follow, because you don't have a choice. The hallway is long and low. You pass open rooms, some padded, some filled with chains. There's a woman sitting on the floor reciting nursery rhymes backward. A child? Number she's at least 50. There's also a man punching himself in the face, over and over. He does it so casually, like scratching an itch. And then you pass the courtyard. That's when it hits you. This place isn't contained. The madness spills out like soup from a cracked bowl. People shuffle in circles. Some talk to birds. One is playing chess against a tree stump and losing. A keeper leans close to you, grinning with 3 teeth. He used to be a lawyer, argued against the crown. Said the king was just a man. You try not to look shocked. That seems dangerous here. Then, out of nowhere, The keeper claps his hands and shouts, "Back to rooms." There's a scuffle. A woman slaps another with an open palm. A man trips over his own tunic. A dog barks, though you're almost certain there's no dog. As you're herded back inside, one of the more composed inmates speaks plainly to you. They used to burn witches, you know. Now they just diagnose them. You nod. Because honestly, it makes more sense than anything else today. Back in your cell, you notice new scratches on the wall. Tally marks? No. Letters. The kind that spell names. Most of them are crossed out. You scratch yours in, without thinking. That night, you're awakened by a whisper through the wall. "You're not real," it says. "They made you up so I'd have someone to talk to." You don't reply. You're too tired, too unsure. Outside, thunder rolls in again. It's always raining here, even when it's dry. The next morning, though it feels more like a continuation of the same endless, airless stretch of time, your body aches like it's been pickled in discomfort. Your joints creak, your skin is sticky, and your stomach growls with that sharp, acidic hunger that doesn't ask politely. Today is your first treatment. You weren't told this, of course. No one warns you in Bedlam. You learn, usually after it's already started. A new keeper shows up. Younger. Fresh jacket. He looks at you with that same mild boredom people usually reserve for unripe fruit or broken doorknobs. He gestures for you to stand. You hesitate. Bad move. He doesn't yell, doesn't even scowl. He just whistles, a shrill practiced note, and suddenly there are two more of them. You're taken not to a room, but to what looks like a medieval kitchen crossed with a stable. Wooden table, leather straps, and an impressive assortment of jars, blades, and buckets. Always a good sign when there are buckets. The physician enters. You can tell he's the physician because his sleeves are too clean and his smile is too sharp. "Ah, you're the new one," he says, as if you're a package that arrived late. "I've read your chart." You don't have a chart. No one has a chart. You get the sense he says that to everyone, like a magician announcing your chosen card. He pats the table. "Let's get that imbalance addressed, shall we?" You lie down, not because you trust him. You absolutely don't. But because 3 men with leather gloves are watching you closely, and 2 are already cracking their knuckles. Straps go across your chest, wrists, and thighs. Not tight, just firm. Suggestive. "Now," the doctor says, retrieving a pouch, "you'll feel a little pinch." A leech slaps wetly onto your temple. You flinch. Another on your arm. One more under your jaw. The doctor steps back, admiring his work like a florist arranging a bouquet. This, in the 18th century, is cutting-edge mental health care. Bloodletting. The idea is simple. Too much blood, they thought, made you mad, or melancholic, or hysterical, or, and this was the real jackpot, rebellious. So the solution? Remove the blood, obviously. As the leeches settle in and start doing their horrific little job, the doctor begins humming. A pleasant tune, one that makes you hate him more somehow. You feel lightheaded, not from fear. That part already passed. No, this is the feeling of your body draining. Your skin grows clammy. Your fingers twitch. Another doctor enters with a hot iron and a pot of something foul-smelling. They start preparing a purgative. This one's a mix of antimony, ground oyster shell, and vinegar. It's supposed to balance your humors. What it actually does is violently eject everything you've eaten, thought, or emotionally processed in the past 48 hours. You don't get to opt out. Down it goes. Your throat burns. Your stomach protests with the rage of a revolution put down too harshly. You vomit. The doctor nods approvingly. Somewhere in the background, another patient howls. Not from pain, but from joy. Apparently, it's his favorite part of the day. Back in your cell later, you collapse onto the wooden plank. You've been wrung out like an old rag. Your cell neighbor whispers again. They put a needle through my eye once. Said they were relieving pressure. You want to say, that's not how pressure works. But your mouth is dry, your vision is fuzzy, and you're not entirely convinced he's wrong. Historians still argue whether treatments like these were acts of ignorance or cruelty in disguise. Maybe both. By the evening, your headache has turned into a full cathedral of bells. Every movement rings. Every blink feels like a drumbeat. They bring you water, cloudy, metal-tasting water in a chipped tin mug. You sip it. That's when you notice the feather. A whole black feather floating at the bottom. You hand it back. The keeper shrugs and drinks it himself. Good for the gut, he says. Probably. You lie back and stare at the ceiling. There are grooves up there, not cracks, etchings, names, dates, shapes. Someone drew a goat in one corner. Another patient is dragged down the hall screaming about fire. You catch only fragments. They're burning it again. Can't you smell the ink? They're burning the words right out of me. No one responds. You begin to wonder what it would take to convince someone you're not mad. Not here, where reason is suspicious and coherence is a symptom. A keeper once said, "We had a man here who made perfect sense. Clean sentences, clean hair, even new poetry. But he refused to scream, not once. That's how we knew he was wrong." The next day, they drilled a hole in his skull. They called it trepanation. You call it Tuesday. Back in the hallway, two physicians are chatting about whether madness is inherited or contagious. One says it's caused by too much thinking. The other says it's the moon. You look up. There's no moon tonight. Only flickering torchlight, shadows, and the steady rhythm of a world that long since stopped caring whether you make it through the week. One more leech wiggles out of your collar. You flick it away. You don't scream. That might be the maddest thing of all. You wake to the sound of someone singing. At first it's soft, a lullaby maybe, or a hymn dragged through molasses. But then it crescendos, and you realize it's in Latin, or at least a version of it that's been violently mugged in an alley. The voice comes from somewhere near the stairwell. You hear chains rattle, then a pause, then the sound of someone slapping their own chest in time with the chanting. You sit up too fast. Your head protests with a wave of nausea and dizziness, still left over from yesterday's enthusiastic blood extraction. Your neighbor coughs softly and says, "Don't try to walk straight today. They'll notice." You ask why, but he doesn't answer. Just hums a low, trembling note and goes silent. Soon you're marched, no, herded, down a corridor with no destination explained. The walls here are closer together. The torches hang lower. You've entered the hallway they call the screaming ward. You think the name is dramatic until you hear it. Not one scream, not two, but a chorus of them, layered like a medieval symphony written by a very disturbed composer. Some are high-pitched and ragged, some are guttural and wet, and some, somehow the worst, are almost mechanical, repeating the same syllables over and over like a cursed music box. You pass a room where a man is hitting his head against the stone wall in perfect time with the screams. A keeper watches him, not with concern, but with investment, like he's wondering whether the tempo will change. Another man in the next room is writing on the wall with his own spit, a passage from the Psalms if you squint hard enough, or maybe just a grocery list for God. A young woman crouches in the hallway, barefoot, whispering names you don't recognize. When she notices you, her eyes brighten. She grabs your hand and says, "I saved a tooth for you." She's not lying. It's in her palm, still bloody, still warm. The keeper yanks you away before you can respond. The room they place you in today isn't your usual cell. It's larger with 4 other patients, all male, all visibly broken in different and terrifyingly creative ways. One rocks violently and mumbles a nursery rhyme in reverse. Another picks at invisible insects crawling up his sleeves. The third just stares at you, constantly. No blinking. No shame. The fourth is God. At least that's how he introduces himself. I am the Lord your shepherd, he says, licking his lips with every other word. And I walk among the filth to test your faith. He asks if you'd like to confess. You politely decline. He spits at your feet anyway, and then proceeds to exercise a nearby chair. This is the room where new arrivals are evaluated. If you scream too quickly, you're dangerous. Too slowly, you're delusional. Just right, that's called stable enough to observe. You stay quiet. Bad move. Someone throws a metal plate at you. It misses. Barely. God laughs. The Lord protects his chosen. You're assigned a corner. The rocking man crawls over and tries to comb your hair with a chicken bone. You let him. Somehow, it's the kindest thing that's happened all day. Hours pass. No one speaks directly to you again. The watchers behind the narrow slit window scribble notes. You're a study now, a specimen. At one point, the man picking imaginary bugs offers you a handful. They keep the voices busy, he says. If they're chewing, they're not yelling. You nod. Take the empty handful. Pretend to eat it. He smiles like you've just handed him peace. Somewhere in this asylum, there's still a bell system. You hear it chime every few hours, not for meals or safety. Just because. Sometimes the staff forget to turn it off, and it tolls through the night like a reminder that time exists. But not for you. The keepers return, drag the chair exorcist away. He blesses each of you as he goes, trailing laughter and spit. As you're led back through the hallway, you see new carvings in the plaster. Names scratched in backwards. Tally marks that skip from 4 to 6. There's a pile of teeth in one corner. Real ones this time. Arranged in a spiral. No one touches them. In the stairwell, someone is hanging upside down by their legs, tied with sheets. A staff member is watching them idly while smoking. He said the world is upside down, she mutters. So we're seeing if he was right. Historians still argue whether these methods were about treatment, punishment, or performance. Maybe they were just what you did when you didn't know what else to do with the broken pieces of a person. Your cell feels different now, smaller, colder. Someone has written "look up" on your wall. So, of course, you do. There's a crude face drawn in soot on the ceiling, smiling with too many teeth. And now you're stuck wondering, was that always there? You wake up feeling like someone wrung you out and forgot to let you dry. Your limbs ache. Your mouth tastes like iron and old spoons. And your stomach feels like it's been replaced by a sock full of gravel. And then it hits you. You're starving. Not the kind of hunger you joke about when you skip breakfast. This is the kind that gnaws at your spine, that makes your hands shake and your patience vanish. Your body is officially out of favors to ask. A keeper opens the cell door and tosses you a wooden bowl with something that vaguely resembles porridge. If porridge had lost the will to live, it's gray. It jiggles. You're not entirely convinced it's not moving. You eat it anyway, because the only alternative is more of that vinegar oyster concoction, and you're not sure your soul could survive a second round of that. There's a slice of bread too, if you can call it that. It's more of a crumbling rock formation with some flour dust on top. You chew carefully to avoid losing a tooth. A patient nearby, the one who hums to insects and calls them mother, eyes your food with such intensity that you instinctively hide your bowl behind your leg. He nods solemnly, then whispers, "You're learning." The dining hall, if you can call it that, is less of a room and more of a corridor with benches. There are no windows, just a narrow slit near the ceiling that lets in a blade of dusty light. People eat here like animals, bent over guarding their bowls, fingers darting fast. One man eats with his eyes closed, muttering, "It's cake." It's cake. It's always cake. Someone drops their bowl. The contents spill and spread slowly across the stone floor. A fight breaks out, not over the food, but over who gets to lick the wall afterward. The keepers don't intervene. They just watch. One of them laughs. Later that afternoon, you're taken to a room that smells like onions, soap, and something more organic. The chamber pots. They don't get emptied often, or at all. Some have names scratched into them. You don't ask. You're handed one. A hint, you think, more than a command. Congratulations, you're now responsible for your own dignity. The bathrooms, if you dare call them that, are communal, smelly, and unsupervised. There's a wooden bench with holes in it, stained with use, and the weight of centuries of suffering. Privacy? No such thing. Someone always watches. Sometimes it's a keeper. Sometimes it's another patient. Once, it's a pigeon that doesn't blink. You're not sure which is worse. There's no toilet paper, just a bucket of cloudy water and a communal rag. You make eye contact with it. It looks back at you with the quiet judgment of a war veteran. In the far corner, someone's laughing again. That same hiccuping laugh that doesn't quite match the face it's coming from. Back in your cell, you feel the ache set in again. Not from treatment, from the food, or lack of it. Your stomach makes a sound like a creaking door, and your neighbor mutters, "Don't let them hear that. They'll think it's a demon." You chuckle, he doesn't. Dinner is worse. Somehow, a slop that tastes like old coins and chalk. You're pretty sure it's just lunch reconstituted. It arrives cold, slapped into a wooden bowl by a keeper who doesn't make eye contact. You ask for water. He hands you a ladle with something that smells faintly of fish and rust. You drink it anyway. Across the hall, someone refuses to eat, says it's poison. The keepers don't force him. They just wait. Eventually he eats. Eventually they all do. Because hunger is the one thing madness can't outwit. Historians still debate whether the food was intentionally revolting or just a product of understaffed kitchens and underpaid cooks. But one thing is certain, it did more to quiet the ward than any sedative. Some patients beg for scraps, others hoard, a few barter, offering secrets or songs in exchange for an extra crust. One patient claims his bowl predicts the future. You hear him whispering to it at night, then screaming when it doesn't respond. The rats eat well here. You see them sometimes darting through cracks in the wall. They're fat, bold. Some of them have names. The inmates call them the clever ones. You begin to envy them. At least they can leave. At least they're not expected to explain why they cry when no one is looking. By the end of the week, you've learned to eat without tasting, to drink without smelling, and to defecate without thinking too hard about the consequences. You've become functional. Not healthy, not sane, just adapted. And that's when it really hits you. This place doesn't want to cure you. It wants to keep you just well enough to scream again tomorrow. It begins like any other bleak and lumpy day. A crust of bread that could chip your molars. A ladle of water that tastes like it was filtered through a Victorian boot. And the usual background symphony of wailing, muttering, and someone somewhere reciting the Lord's Prayer with an unsettling emphasis on "deliver us from evil." But then the doors to your ward swing open wide, and a crowd shuffles in. Not patients, visitors, dressed in silks and powdered wigs, smelling of pomade, perfume, and money. Some come with children. One carries a parasol indoors. Another giggles as she points to the man in the corner chewing his sleeve. This is not a rescue. It's not an inspection. It's entertainment. Welcome to your debut on London's strangest stage, Asylum tourism. The 18th century was nothing if not enterprising. Bethlehem Hospital, Bedlam, as it was lovingly dubbed by the common folk, opened its gates every Sunday and holiday for paying visitors. For a coin or two, the fine citizens of the city could stroll past the bars and view the curiosities like animals in a particularly melancholic zoo. And now you're one of them. You're told to stand, not by command, just through pressure. A keeper nudges your arm. The others are doing it. Your neighbor, The one who talks to shadows brushes lint off his tunic. Gotta look presentable, he mumbles. Might find a sponsor. The first gawker is a man with a bright red waistcoat and eyebrows like anxious caterpillars. He leans close to your face, too close, and remarks to his friend, "This one looks almost normal. That's the most dangerous kind." They laugh. You don't. A boy presses his fingers through the bars, offers you a candy, then immediately snatches it back and shrieks with delight like you're a bear at feeding time. Your fists clench, but you don't move, because that's what they want. Next, a woman points at the muttering man next to you. "That one's a poet," she says. "They say he killed his wife with a quill." You've heard his story. He was arrested for vagrancy. The only poem he knows is a butchered limerick about a shoe. But here, facts are elastic. A man in a powdered wig watches another patient bang his head against the wall and claps politely. "Brilliant performance," he says. "Very immersive." This continues for over an hour. Some patients perform, not for fun, but for food. Some dance, some scream on cue. One recites scripture while standing on his bed. Others retreat inward, rocking, crying, whispering mantras to themselves. You're somewhere in between. You remember what one of the keepers said last night. Half joke, half threat. If you don't give the crowd something, they'll poke until you do. So you choose carefully. A vacant stare, a tilt of the head. Just odd enough to pass, not enough to provoke. But not everyone's so skilled. The woman across from you, quiet for days, suddenly erupts. She flings her water bowl and screams, "They took my baby! They took my baby!" The visitors recoil, gasp, then lean in. This is what they came for. Keepers descend. The woman is dragged away. You never see her again. A boy claps as they pull her down the corridor. "Do it again," he yells. Someone nearby mutters, "She's not acting." Her husband bribed a doctor, said grief was unbecoming. You don't doubt it. That's a common story here. Grief misdiagnosed as hysteria. Rage labeled as madness. Disobedience rebranded as delusion. One patient was committed for laughing too loudly at a dinner party. Another for writing poetry, unfit for feminine temperament. And those are the lucky ones. Some came here by accident. Wrong name, wrong place, wrong diagnosis. Others were just inconvenient. Historians still debate whether this system was malice or bureaucracy with a blunt instrument. But either way, it left people like you and her in chains. The visitors begin to leave. You hear coins clink into the keeper's hand. "Very entertaining," one woman says, "though I prefer the louder ones." A young man, maybe 17, catches your eye and mouths, "Sorry." Too late. The gates close. The hall goes quiet again, eerily quiet, as if all the madness has taken a breath to reset. Someone begins weeping, quiet, slow, exhausted. You want to say something comforting, but the truth is, words here don't carry like they used to. They sink. Back in your cell, you find a small drawing etched into the stone wall. A stick figure with a crown. Underneath it, the king came to visit. He did not stay. You try to sleep, but the echoes of laughter outside the bars follow you into the dark. And somewhere deep inside, you start to understand why some of them never came back from the performance. Because after enough time on display, the act becomes the truth. And when you forget where the mask ends, the madness begins. The ward smells different today. Less like mildew and rusted metal, more like soap and vinegar. That doesn't happen often, which means only one thing: change. And in a place like this, change is never good. You notice it right away. The keepers are tense. The halls have been swept. A wet trail glistens along the edge of the stone floor, leading from the far gate like a snail's path through rot. Then you hear it. A sharp, wet coughing from the end of the corridor, younger than most, the kind of cough that sounds pulled from the spine. A woman's voice. Then comes the slow creak of wheels on stone, uneven, hesitant. She's brought in strapped to a wooden cart, not a gurney, not a wheelchair, just a crude plank on wheels with rope bindings knotted into her wrists and ankles, like she's a sack of flour that talked back. Her hair is matted, not with dirt, but with defiance. Her eyes flick across the corridor like she's memorizing the building. Her feet are bare, mud-caked. One arm jerks upward as though it's trying to run away. The other is tied down. A nurse says quietly, "Another hysteric." The women's ward is down a separate corridor, not for safety, not for quiet, for shame. They keep the women away from the men, not because they fear violence, but because the female patients don't scream the same way. Theirs is a different madness. Sharper, softer, and more dangerous. You're not supposed to see inside that wing, but today, for just a moment, the doors are open. A keeper shouts, "Turn your heads." You don't. You just blink slowly, like you're tired, like you didn't notice the sound. But through that brief sliver of open space, you glimpse it. Stone floors smeared with something pink. A woman kneeling, arms bound behind her back, rocking in front of a shattered window, as if trying to remember what the sky used to look like. A nurse stands nearby, reading a letter aloud. The patient laughs, high, tight, with no humor. Then the doors slam shut. Welcome to the women's ward of woe. You hear them at night. Not always screaming, sometimes laughing, sometimes humming lullabies that melt mid-note into static. One croons the alphabet backward in a thick Irish accent. Another reads invisible letters aloud to a lover she insists is trapped inside the chimney. They say madness takes different shapes in women, that their minds twist around silence like vines around iron. That sorrow, repressed long enough, turns into prophecy. And that's what scares the doctors the most. There are tales passed between cots and behind cracked doors, stories that live in the marrow. The baths. Not warm, healing soaks, not gentle hands and soft cloths. These are punishments disguised as restoratives. Cold water immersions, brutal plunges into ice, sometimes for seconds, sometimes for hours, to temper the nerves, to quiet the disorder. One woman came out of the tub blue, not metaphorically, literally. The hue of a forget-me-not petal, pressed flat. She hasn't spoken since. Another was left in overnight. They forgot her. When they pulled her out, she thought she was in a lake. They wrapped her in linen, told her it was a blanket. She said it was her shroud. They also like to spin the women. Yes, spin. A chair on a central axis, with leather straps to hold the chest, wrists, and forehead. Once secured, they're spun. Gently at first, then faster, until their thoughts unspool like thread. The idea is that if the mind is dizzy enough, it won't have the strength to resist. It's called realignment. One woman bit through the forehead strap last week. She broke 2 molars in the process. It took 3 men to pin her down. The story they whisper is that she was once a maid in a noble house. The Lord took a liking to her. She refused. So she was examined, then confined. Now she just smiles when she's spun. A dead, hollow smile that never quite reaches the eyes. You wonder, how many women here were declared mad simply for saying no? How many were locked up not because they were sick, but because they were inconvenient? Loud? Sad? Smart? Too clever? Too mouthy? Too different? One nurse, a stout woman with cracked knuckles and a crooked brooch shaped like a rose, speaks to the patients like they're dogs who've ruined the rug. "Oh, you poor silly thing," she purrs. "Did we get all weepy again?" You see the aftermath later. A woman with claw marks down her own cheeks, muttering rhythmically, "I am a violin. I am a violin." They say she used to be a composer. Toured Vienna. Now she taps out scales on the floorboards with her fingernails. Music no one hears. Today you're assigned linen duty. A rare honor. Trust, they call it. It's supposed to be silent. In, out, no talking, no eye contact. But silence doesn't hold in the women's wing. The moment you step in, a patient grabs your sleeve. Her fingernails cut through the fabric and pierce your skin like thorns. "I used to read," she hisses, eyes like wildfire. "They said I read too much." You freeze. She leans closer. "He said I was too clever. Said clever women don't sleep right. Said clever women invite dreams that don't belong to them." A nurse peels her away, chuckling. Oh, she's always making up stories. But her eyes burn like someone who remembers being believed. In the corner, one woman rocks a mop like it's a newborn. Another accuses her own reflection in a cracked mirror of stealing her thoughts and sending them by letter to the clergy. The ward is painted with soft, hopeful pastels, pinks, blues, gentle creams, meant to soothe. But underneath the paint, the scratches remain. Scratched through color, through plaster, through time. One reads, "Martha was here, then she wasn't." And someone else added beneath it, "I remember." Historians have recovered countless records of women admitted for reasons more poetic than pathological. Reading too much, writing unsupervised, laughing too loudly at sermons. One woman was admitted for excessive letter writing, another for verbal mania after confronting her husband about finances. A midwife who tended unwed mothers was accused of maternal delusions and spiritual disorder. The paper trail is always clean. The walls are not. You return to your own ward feeling colder than the stone should allow. That night, the woman who usually sings nonsense lullabies sings something new. A melody soft and pure, almost sweet. But the lyrics pull the air out of your chest. They took my name and fed me lies. Said madness danced behind my eyes. I wasn't sick, just too aware. So they drowned my voice in freezing air. You don't sleep. The bed is too hard, the air too loud, and the truth far, far too heavy. You don't hear him enter? He's just there one morning, sitting upright on the floor of the far corner of your cell, legs crossed, hands neatly folded, eyes fixed on the same spot in the stone wall, with the intensity of someone listening to a sermon only he can hear. The keepers don't explain. They never do. They shove a second bowl of gray porridge under the bars. 2 now. 1 for you, 1 for him. But he doesn't touch it, doesn't move. He doesn't speak. The man is thin, not just from hunger, but in a way that suggests time has worn him down like river rock. He could be 30 or 50. He could be a statue if it weren't for the occasional blink. You try the usual? A cough, a nod, a simple hello. Nothing. Just silence. Welcome to your newest mystery. The quiet ones are the worst. It's a phrase you've heard whispered by orderlies, muttered in passing, and etched into a splintered windowsill 3 doors down. At first, it sounds like paranoia. Until you meet him. The next few days pass slowly. You eat, you cough, you scratch another mark into the wall. He doesn't blink. Once during the night, you wake up to the sound of your own name, spoken softly, from his direction. But when you sit up, he's still facing the wall, eyes wide, unmoving. There's no way he knows your name, right? On day 3, a keeper brings a pail of water. The man doesn't react. The keeper spits at his feet and says, "He's been like that since 91. Let him rot." But later, when the keeper's gone, you see him flex his fingers. Briefly, like someone testing the strings on an old puppet. You whisper, "Can you hear me?" Nothing. The next night, the man next door tells you something you wish you hadn't asked for. He killed a doctor once. back when he talked, used the man's own scalpel, said he was cutting the lies out of the air. They stitched him up, put him in here, and he hasn't said a word since. You ask why he's not in a solitary room. The answer is simple. They like to see what happens when you break something twice. Every now and then, the quiet man breathes differently, faster, sharper, like he's having an argument without words. And once, just once, he hums. 3 notes, barely audible, but the melody is older than memory. It worms into your ear and stays there like a forgotten name. You start noticing things. Your blanket is folded differently each morning. Your shoes are moved half an inch. And a drawing appears on your wall. A perfect spiral drawn in something brownish red. You didn't draw it. You ask the neighbor again. He says, "They say he's not insane. They say he sees too clearly." So he stopped speaking to stop feeding the machine. You want to laugh, a light, sarcastic chuckle, but your voice catches in your throat like a fishhook, because part of you believes it. Historians still argue whether these so-called quiet cases were simply catatonic, severely traumatized, or something else entirely, something they didn't know how to name. There were those who sat in complete silence for decades, others who never spoke again after one event, a funeral, a fire, an accusation. One patient, documented in a letter from 1774, didn't utter a word for 22 years. Then one day, without prompting, she whispered, "It was the bell." Then never again. Back in your cell, the man finally moves. Not far, just a shift in posture. He turns his head 1 inch to the left, toward you, and smiles. Not cruelly, not kindly, just knowingly. And for some reason, that scares you more than anything else. You lie down, close your eyes, and pretend to sleep. But all night, you feel his gaze pressed against your skin like a second blanket. In the morning, he's gone. No warning, no sound. Just an empty corner and a faint, spiral drawing on your floor. You hear the jangle before you see him. Not a single key, not even a bunch, but an army. Dozens, maybe hundreds, hanging from a thick iron ring on his belt, swinging like miniature church bells. They clink in rhythm, tapping out a hymn that no sane man would ever hum, but every patient recognizes like a lullaby carved in steel. The keeper with the keys. His silhouette rounds the corner slowly, and even the stones seem to lean away. He walks with a limp, not the kind born from injury, but something cultivated, controlled, a stagger used like punctuation. He carries a cane, but it's no support. It's a warning. Each step lands with a deliberate 2-part rhythm. Tap, clink, tap, clink. Wood and metal. Ritual and menace. No one knows his real name, or if he even has one anymore. Some call him Bent Jack, others whisper Stumbleman. One patient insists he was once a battlefield surgeon, the kind who cut faster than he stitched. Another swears he was never officially hired, that he simply arrived one day and never left. But one truth threads through every version of him. He enjoys his work. Too much. You meet him properly for the first time when your cell door opens with no warning and he steps inside like fog with boots. The scent arrives first. Smoke, oil, something faintly metallic, like old pennies in water. Then the boots. Leather, cracked, polished in patches. They squeak when he moves, not because they're wet, but because they choose to. He surveys your room like it's a crime scene from a dream. Then his eyes, 2 hard bird-bright orbs, flick toward you. "You haven't screamed yet?" he says, voice flat as wet stone. You try to answer, maybe a polite explanation, maybe just a question, but he raises a gloved hand. Don't explain. The quiet ones make the best echoes. He walks a slow loop around the room, taps one of the walls, then places something on your cot. A smooth piece of bone, carved, curved, polished, shaped unmistakably like a question mark. You look up, but he's already gone. You don't ask why. You don't dare. Over time, you learn his patterns, or try to. He doesn't walk rounds like the others. No hourly check. No predictable loop. He appears during in-between moments, halfway through a prayer, mid-bite during dinner, just as sleep reaches your shoulders. He mutters in Latin when he passes the chapel. Not reverently, not mockingly, more like he's speaking to someone deeper in the floorboards. Always, always the keys. Some patients flinch when they hear the jingle. Others sit up straighter, fold their hands, smile mechanically. They've learned. Because Jack has favorites, not people. Devices. One is a chair. He calls it the cradle. Made of cherry wood and iron, its arms fitted with clamps. The headrest is stained and scorched, either wax or something worse. Another is the persuader. A vice crossed with a gag. It tightens if you speak too loudly, or at all. There's the cellar. That one has no nickname, because no one talks about it. But you've heard it. The screaming doesn't come up in words, just in raw syllables, shreds of breath. One long drawn-out sound like a soul trying to escape through someone else's mouth. One patient came back from it unable to sit upright. Another never came back. The staff just said, he's been reassigned. You've since learned that reassigned is what they say when someone has ceased to be narratively convenient. Historians still argue about men like Jack, whether they were isolated perversions of authority or a symptom of a machine that rewards cruelty. Some letters describe similar figures in other institutions, limping men with too many keys, too few expressions, and a fondness for customized restraints. Other sources claim he was passed between asylums like a cursed relic, never fired, never promoted, just transferred, like rot between bones. But here's the twist. Not everyone fears him. Some revere him. They say he knows who's faking and who's fractured, that he's seen the real files, that he can unlock memory, identity, even truth, if you ask the right way. One woman bowed when he entered. He holds the map, she whispered. He just won't give you the key. Another tried to trade him her teeth. For what, she never said. There's a story, always a story, about a man who begged for release, pleaded every day. Finally, Jack took him to a small room, locked the door, and said, "You're free." The man died months later, dehydrated and smiling, surrounded by drawings of trees and birds he believed were real. He'd used his own blood to paint a window on the wall. You ask your neighbor if it's true. Does it matter, he says? If you believe you're free, maybe you are. Since then, your dreams have changed. Keys fall from ceilings like iron snow. They clatter on your shoulders. They clink against your ribs. Each one is tagged with a word: mother, river, light, home. Words you've forgotten how to say aloud. And then one morning, your door is open. Not ajar, not broken, just open. No footsteps, no warning, no sound. You rise slowly, step into the hall. 3 other doors, all shut tight. You turn the corner, and there he is, Jack, standing perfectly still, like he knew the exact minute you would arrive. In his gloved hand, he holds a single key, not like the rest. It's small, silver, clean. For later, he says, you don't speak. In case, he adds, you find a door that doesn't like you. He smiles, and it's not cruel. It's not warm either. It's the smile of someone who has seen every version of your life and already buried each one in a different hallway. He turns, walks away. Tap, clink, tap, clink. You look down at the key in your palm. It's cold, too cold for something metal. like it was made from a question you haven't asked yet. You don't put it in your pocket. You bury it in the straw. Because freedom is dangerous here. Freedom makes you noticeable. And the man with the keys isn't the only one who hears when a lock starts to tremble. The morning starts with rain again. It always does. Maybe it's real rain. Maybe it's just the building weeping. Either way, the sky is sobbing softly against the stone, and you're already wet before breakfast. They come for you after the gruel. Two keepers with matching frowns and the energy of men who've had enough of subtlety. You're due, one says. For what, you ask? They don't answer. You're taken to a chamber you haven't seen before. It smells like iron and vinegar. The floor is sticky. That's not a metaphor. It is literally sticky. A physician stands by a large contraption that looks like a chandelier, mated with a spinning wheel, and deeply regrets it. Chains dangle. A leather strap dangles from the ceiling. There's a chair bolted to the floor. Welcome, he says with dry cheer, to rotational therapy. You don't sit, you just stare at it. He sighs. I see we're doing this the hard way. Within seconds, you're strapped in, forehead pinned, hands bound, and the world begins to turn. Literally. They spin the chair, not once, not playfully, not gently. They spin until the walls blur, until your stomach flips, until the word why becomes a flavor in your mouth. It is somehow both too fast and not fast enough. This is treatment. Supposedly. The belief is that disorientation calms the mind, spins the madness right out. In reality, it mostly ejects lunch and any sense of self. You vomit. Of course. The doctor nods, pleased. Means it's working. Then, without warning, they stop the spinning. Suddenly, your brain keeps turning while your body tries to figure out if it's still alive. You're left in the chair for a while. They say it's to let the senses settle. It's definitely to humiliate you. When they finally unstrap you, you collapse like a dropped puppet. Your legs don't work. Your eyes won't agree on which direction is up. And still, you're expected to walk back to your cell. The other inmates don't laugh. They don't have to. The silence is worse. That's when you learn what cures look like in here. Spinning, bleeding, dunking. Yes, dunking. Cold water immersion therapy. Sometimes it's just a splash to the face. Other times it's a full dunking in an ice-filled tub. The goal? Shock the brain into compliance. You hear of a woman who cured her melancholy after being plunged into a barrel 3 times a day for a month. She now refers to herself only as the fish. One patient is locked in a chair called the whirler, like your earlier ride, but with added metal plates and noise-making chains. He hasn't spoken in weeks, only hums. Loud, always the same note. Another woman is prescribed the blistering. You don't ask, you see the results. Your arms are sore the next day, your balance is gone, you bump into your own bed frame and apologize to it. This continues. Every few days, something new. Hot mustard plasters on your back. A copper helmet that buzzes when lightning's nearby. A glass tube filled with magnetized air. You're supposed to inhale it and let it realign your stars. You can't even smell it, but the doctor insists it's spiritually active. You nod. Of course it is. Historians still argue whether these treatments were based on science, superstition, or sheer guesswork. Most likely all three, shaken vigorously in a flask labeled progress. The worst part? Some of it does change people. Not for the better. But it changes them. One man used to bark like a dog. After 2 months of electric stimulation and daily emetics, he stopped barking. Now he just stares at his hands all day. Progress. You begin to dread knock-knock sounds, the ones that come before they say your name. They always say your name like it's been mispronounced by a foreign god. You again? Yes, you. Time for clarity. Clarity is pain. Clarity is spinning and buzzing and dunking. You dream of being still, of not being cured. You begin to suspect that madness might be the body's defense mechanism, that it might actually be the sane response to this place. One night, your neighbor mutters, "They don't fix you here. They reformat you." You whisper back, "And if we don't take?" He shrugs. "Then we're archived." You don't ask what that means. You just hug your knees and press your forehead to the wall, trying to remember the shape of your name. It's getting harder. And the chair is getting easier. It starts with a cough, not yours, someone else's. Short, dry, forgettable. But by the time you finish your breakfast paste, today's flavor is boiled disappointment with a hint of rust. 4 other patients have joined in. You line up for chamber pot duty, and a man collapses right there in the hall. The keepers don't move. They step over him. One even mutters, "Lazy." Later, you hear he's dead. That's the 3rd one this month. But none of them were sick. Not really. Not mad, not broken. Just in the way. And that's when you start noticing a pattern. Not everyone in Bedlam is insane. Some are just inconvenient. Your diagnosis, inconvenience. There's the priest's daughter who wanted to marry a sailor. Now she recites psalms in a whisper so faint it sounds like wind. They called her possessed. The political satirist who printed pamphlets. Now he scribbles poetry on the walls with coal and says birds report his thoughts to Parliament. There's the retired widow who refused to give her inheritance to her nephew. He signed the papers. Now she rocks in a corner and murmurs about poison in the marmalade. And then there's you. Why are you here? It's a question you stopped asking, but today it returns. Because today a new man arrives. He's well-dressed, mustached, wears gloves, still smells like lavender. He shouts, loud, furious, "This is a mistake. I was tricked." The keepers don't listen. They nod as if they've heard it all before. They probably have. He demands a hearing, a lawyer, a witness. They hand him a ragged tunic and say, "Try not to get blood on it." The rest of you just watch. He'll learn. Later that night, the man in the next cell asks you, "Remember the woman who made lace?" You nod, barely. "She had too many opinions." That's all he says, and it's enough. This is not a place for the broken. It's a place for the unwanted. Historians have combed through records of 18th century asylums and found hundreds of cases labeled simply unsuitable behavior, improper emotions, or argumentative disposition. One man was committed for excessive cleverness, another for elevated melancholy following political engagement. And women? Oh, the bar was lower. One sneezed too often at church. Another was caught reading Shakespeare alone. But it wasn't always that overt. Sometimes it was subtle. A father ashamed of a son who stammered. A husband tired of a wife who cried too often. A brother looking to inherit faster. This place is full of people who weren't insane, just inconvenient. And if you weren't mad when you got here, you will be. Because once you're in, the system grinds you. You say something reasonable? Proof you're manipulative. You ask to leave? Paranoia. You remain silent? Catatonic. You scream? Violent. Every reaction is a symptom. Every symptom justifies your stay. You're not a person anymore. You're paperwork. You overhear a keeper laughing? We had a woman once who cured herself. Said she'd found God in the garden. Spoke calmly. Ate clean. We let her go. You feel a flicker of hope. Until he adds, she hung herself a week later. Should have kept her. It's all a game. And the rules change. The newest ward transfer is a man who insists he's Napoleon. Nothing new. But he speaks fluent French, knows battle history, and gives surprisingly good advice. The staff call him the general, but you hear another story, that he was a general, or maybe just someone too high up to embarrass publicly. So they tucked him away. Far easier to vanish someone than to debate them. One of the nurses jokes, "This place doesn't treat illness, it manufactures obscurity." She thinks it's funny. You don't, because you've stopped remembering what day it is. And now you're starting to forget what year it is. And when the newest arrival sits beside you and asks, "Is this Dover?" you almost say yes. Because why not? Reality here is porous, leaky, thin. You sit in silence for hours, watching dust float through light and wondering whether dust has opinions. Because if it does, it might be safer to keep them to itself. And for the first time, you don't want to get better. You want to vanish better. You want to master the art of invisibility, of non-friction, of being so small that the system forgets to grind you. And for a brief, breathless moment, you wonder if madness is actually freedom. They say night brings silence. They are wrong. Night in the asylum doesn't quiet the world, it unwraps it. It peels back the layers between what's real and what's been quietly waiting beneath your skin. It's not shouting, not weeping, not the occasional boot-scraping tile. It's the unexplained, the almost sounds, the things that tug at the edges of your sleep like curious fingers and ask, "Are you still sane? Just checking." Tonight, the chains are louder than usual. Not yours, not yet, but someone nearby has them. And they're moving, slow, measured, like a grandfather clock built from bones. The chains that clink at night. You try to ignore it. You even chuckle, dry and cracked. Probably just the usual. You whisper. Then the voice starts. Not from the next room. Not even from the hall. From under the floorboards. Software Latin. A chant smooth as water over stone. It's him. The man who used to speak scripture like it was an apology. You saw him taken away? Days ago. Stretcher, blankets, head strapped. But now he's back. Or maybe he never left. Reciting psalms with perfect rhythm. Each word like a needle through cloth. Like a priest blessing things that should not be blessed. You slam your fist into the wall. Shut up! No reply. Your neighbor doesn't even blink. He just says, "You're hearing them now?" Huh, took longer than I thought. You stare at him. What are you talking about? He smiles, not kindly. You've tuned in? It's nonsense. Sleep-deprived nonsense. Except, you are hearing more. A woman humming green sleeves through clenched teeth. Fingers, soft and slow, dragging across stone. Scraping, pausing, scraping again. And the chains. Always the chains. You ask a keeper the next day. He barely looks up. We don't keep chains in this wing. You press. But I heard. He shrugs. Old pipes? Settling bricks? Then winks. It's a joke, probably. Maybe. Later, an older patient offers an explanation, casual as weather talk. Oh, that's James, she says. They chained him up in the sub-basement. Lost the key. She smiles like it's a bedtime story. But don't worry, he's very patient. You laugh because you're supposed to, but your hands won't stop trembling. Historians once found records. Men kept chained in isolation for decades, some for violence, some for defiance, some just for being inconvenient. One man survived 14 years in a sealed room, named each of his lice. There are places in this asylum you're not allowed to see. No one mentions them. But some nights, through the iron vents, you hear things. Breathing. Heavy, wet, not yours. A cane tapping. Or maybe hooves. Hard to tell at this distance. And the voice. Always the same. low, measured, whispering the same phrase. Open the door. The door to what? No one answers. Your own cell feels wrong now. Same walls, same bed, but the air is thicker, like soup or fog, like something else is breathing it first. You ask your neighbor again, what's with the chains? He turns slowly. Not everything locked up here is human. You laugh, nervously. He doesn't. That night the voice changes. It says your name. Not shouts. Whispers. Like it's trying not to wake something else. Like it's already in the room. Then, silence. Then, the chains again. You curl under the blanket. Like that could stop anything. By morning, there are scratches on your door. 5 of them. Parallel. Deep. Still fresh. You ask a keeper if there are animals in the building. He chuckles. Not unless you count the ones who talk. He means it as a joke. Probably. That evening, someone leaves a tray of roasted chestnuts outside your door. Warm. Fragrant. Real. You didn't request them. No one else got any. You don't eat them. In the morning, they're gone. The scratch marks are deeper. You start to count the chains. Every night. 3 clinks. Then silence. Then the voice. Always in that order. You ask around. One patient, missing 3 fingers and most of his teeth, tells you the chains are anchors. They hold the building in place. Keep it from slipping back into the earth. Another says it's you making the sound. Not now. In the future. Your mind already broke. You're just catching up. You start sleeping with your back to the wall. Eyes open. Waiting. Eventually the voice returns. Closer. No chant, no riddle. Just this. You left the door open. You know something's wrong the moment the hallway goes quiet. Not the normal kind of quiet. Not the shuffling, muttering, tooth-grinding stillness you've come to expect in this place. This silence is dense. It wraps around your head like wet wool. Smothers your ears. Even the air seems to hesitate. Then, boots. Dozens of them. A hard, deliberate rhythm. Too crisp for staff. Too confident for orderlies. Someone new has arrived. Not a patient. Not part of this. An outsider. Tall. Pressed. Polished. His leather shoes reflect the gaslight, an insult in this building of grime and slow decay. He walks like the floor offends him. His nose twitches like he's trying not to inhale. And his coat? Not just white. Sterile. So white it looks angry. He wears the physician's coat the way a conqueror wears a crown. Like it was earned in blood that wasn't his. But he's not alone. Trailing behind him is a herd of eager men, too clean, too young, too full of diagrams and dreams. They carry notebooks like weapons, clipboards like commandments. Their eyes gleam with possibility, not mercy, not doubt, only possibility. They call him Dr. M-, and the whispers start before his second step. Came from the continent, French training, studied under Mesmer himself. Perfect. A man with theories. A man who's never had to sit in the chair. A man who came here not to heal, but to prove something. He picks 5 patients for observation. You're one of them. Lucky you. You're led down a side corridor into a room colder than death and brighter than God ever intended. The air smells of ink and iron and something trying very hard to be clean. The walls are covered in parchment illustrations, diagrams of skulls, copper wires, spinal incisions, and a beautiful machine named Cerebral Harmony Inducer. It looks like something that should be buried. Deep. With a warning etched in Latin above it. Dr. M- looks you over without touching you. His eyes are like scalpels. Blink, he says. Now don't. Smile. Now frown. You do your best. He scribbles furiously. Nods, satisfied. You haven't said a word? Then he wheels over a device. It hums. It clicks. It looks like a telescope mated with a bear trap and gave birth to something that should not exist. This, he says proudly, is the future. Electrotherapy. You've heard the name. They say it realigns the humors, that it wakes the dormant faculties. It sounds scientific. It feels like a trap. 2 pads are pressed to your temples, wet, cold, trembling with anticipation. You open your mouth to ask, to plead, but the assistant flicks the switch. White, not light, not pain, just white, as if your brain was turned inside out and shown to something hungry. Your thoughts scatter like birds fleeing a thunderclap. Then, black. You wake up on the floor? He is still smiling. They always fall the first time, promising results. You blink at him. You don't remember your name. Just a taste of experimental science, heavy on the mental. In the days that follow, more devices arrive. A helmet stuffed with magnets. A wand that smells like burnt copper and regret. One man is strapped into a wool-lined vest that hums with current. Dr. M calls it vestibular memory modulation. It mostly causes rashes. You meet a woman who underwent ocular intervention. 2 needles, each tear duct. She doesn't blink anymore. She just stares. One patient receives music therapy. She's locked in a white room with a violinist who plays the same 4 notes, over and over, for 6 hours. When she begins to scream, they scribble notes. Breakthrough imminent. You ask an assistant, quietly, if anyone ever gets better. He smiles. They get quieter. Historians will one day argue, was this the dawn of a new era, or a dressed-up slaughterhouse of the soul? Some of the machines will go on to inspire actual medicine. Others will be dismantled, renamed, buried with the bodies. You're chosen again. This time, tonic immersion. You're stripped, lowered into a tank filled with water laced with animal electricity. It feels like being drowned by a ghost that's laughing at you. You come out choking, twitching. For 2 days, you forget how to button your shirt. You forget the word yesterday. You hear about a man taken for cranial pressure release. He returns with a bandage wrapped tight. His mouth is open, but no sound comes. His eyes look like they're stuck. You glimpse Dr. M-Dash's notes. Marked reduction in spontaneous language. Consider repeating. It hits you then. They're not trying to cure your mind. They're trying to map it. Rearrange it. Make it agreeable. You are no longer a person. You are data. One night, passing the lab, you see it. A brain in a jar. Prodded. Measured. Poked. You pray it wasn't anyone you knew. Dr. M whistles as he works. A merry little tune. You wonder if he hums at funerals too. You return to your cell. Dizzy. Cold. Unable to remember what salt tastes like? You tell the wall about it. The wall listens. The wall has never interrupted you. You name it Clarence. That night, Clarence tells you a joke. You laugh. You worry it was actually funny. Or maybe the machines are working. You start keeping a list in your head. Not names. Those are slippery now, like fish in murky water. Not days. Time's gone soft, like wet parchment left out in the rain. No, you're counting disappearances. Noticed first as absences, then as patterns, then as proof. It starts small. A man you played marbles with in the courtyard, quiet fellow, liked to whistle off key, gone. No tray for him at breakfast. His bed remade. No mention in roll call. His name drops from the air like it was never spoken. Then the woman who argued with pigeons through the bars. Loud, funny, could curse in 5 languages. Vanished. The staff say she was transferred. No cart. No paperwork. No farewell. Just the word. Delivered with a smirk, like they're telling a joke you're not smart enough to understand. Transferred. Always the same word. Always the same half smile. As if transfer means something else entirely. The ones who notice start whispering. One patient draws tally marks in chalk on the underside of his bunk. When the chalk vanishes in the night, he starts carving them into his thigh. Quietly. Methodically. You ask a keeper casually, like you're asking about the weather. Where did Elias go? He shrugs. Didn't need him anymore. Didn't need him. Like a broken chair. Or a spilled tray. The dreams begin not long after. Endless corridors. Gray flickering with gaslight that doesn't flicker right. Doors line the walls like tombstones. Behind each one, a face you half recognize. They look at you. They open their mouths. No words. Just static. Like a broken gramophone in an empty theater. Like something trying to speak through the wrong format. You ask your neighbor one day, do people ever get released? He squints, thinks, then shrugs. Only in pieces. You press him. Like, discharged? He laughs. You're still thinking like someone outside. In here, released can mean a lot of things. Sometimes it means death. Sometimes it means disappearance. And sometimes, it means something else. One night you hear it. Not screaming. Not moaning. Clapping. Applause in the hallway. Polite, rehearsed, delighted. You press your ear to the door. A voice booming and proud. Patient 44 has been successfully reintegrated. You don't know a patient 44. No one does. You peek through the bars. The hallway is empty. The next morning, no one's missing. Except Margaret. No, wait, Clarence. No, Clarence is your wall. You meant Margaret. Red hair. Fingerless gloves. Whistled like a train. Gone. No record. No goodbyes. Just an empty cell and a strange smell, like rust and cloves. Historians still debate whether 18th century asylums lost patients or simply erased them. Some files list phrases like transferred to private care, reclaimed by family, but no destinations, no signatures, no follow-up. Other files were burned, or water damaged, or redacted with surgical precision. One physician's journal from 1793 contains a single chilling line. 22 entered, 18 remain, all accounted for. No further context. No names. Just math. You start leaving marks. A line carved beneath your bed frame. A scratch behind the basin. Tiny monuments. Little proofs of life. Because you're starting to believe. The asylum forgets people on purpose. One day, a man swears he saw another patient in 2 different wards on the same afternoon. Same face. Same scar above the brow. Same lazy right eye. Someone asks, a twin? He shakes his head. A replacement. You laugh. At first, then you see him. And yes, same scar. Same awkward smile. Same birthmark on the left hand. But he doesn't recognize you. Not even a flicker. You ask his name. He says, Thomas. That was your name. Wasn't it? You lie down. Pull the blanket to your chin. And whisper to the ceiling. Don't forget me. Clarence doesn't respond. You worry he's been reassigned. There is a door at the far end of the western hall. A door that no one speaks of. Not openly. You've passed it once. Maybe twice. It's red. But not red like fire trucks or cherries or lipstick. No, it's older than that, darker, weathered. A shade like dried blood, like rusted iron soaked in sorrow, like bad wine left too long to rot in a cellar. It doesn't gleam, it doesn't beckon, it waits. They call it the Red Room. Not out loud, never out loud. But you've heard the name just the same. Heard it in half sentences, in accidental murmurs, in conversations that break off mid-word. She's still in there. She never blinks. She bit off her own tongue, or maybe someone else's. One of the night nurses says she's been in there since before the French Revolution. Another claims she's just a ghost story invented to keep the orderlies in line. But the patients? The patients believe? And belief in a place like this spreads like mold in the walls. Eventually, curiosity sinks its hooks in. And you ask. Of all people, it's the cook who tells you. That room's been sealed nearly 30 years. They say she cured herself, but not in a way you'd want to understand. Now it festers in your mind, like a splinter in thought, like an unanswered whisper. And then, one morning, it happens. You're delivering linens, a rare privilege granted after months of quiet behavior. You turn the corner into the Western Hall. No staff, no footsteps, just a long, silent corridor, thick with breathless stillness. And at the end, a sliver of red. The door. You hesitate. Then you move. As you near it, the air changes. Heavier. Denser. Like standing beside something alive that's trying not to breathe too loud. And then you hear it. A hum? Not mechanical, not electrical. Organic, insectile. Like a beehive, buried behind wood and stone. You press your ear to the door. Nothing. Then, a scratch. 1. Then 2. Then 5. In a rhythm that isn't quite random. A pattern that bypasses your ears and goes straight to your spine. You flinch. Your fingers twitch. You're about to back away when you hear it. A voice. Faint. Female. Frayed at the edges. Heard you coming. You stumble backward so violently, you hit the opposite wall with your shoulder. No alarm goes off. No staff rushes in. No one saw. No one ever does. That night, over watery soup and lukewarm coffee, you ask the physician, the one always sketching blood vessels and muttering Latin into his notebook. He chuckles. The Red Room? Old wives' tale? Plumbing's shot in that wing. Rats too. But he won't meet your eyes. And his hand is shaking. You go back. Once. Maybe twice. Never for long. But long enough to feel it. Each time, breathing. Not panting. Not gasping. Waiting. You try to make sense of it. What kind of woman gets locked away so deep, so absolutely, that even the rats steer clear of her door? Your neighbor, a former theology student turned catatonic prophet, offers a theory. She was too clear, spoke truths no one wanted said, about God, about the nature of men, about this place. You laugh it off, but your palms are damp. There's a rumor she was once a midwife, or a nun, or a poet, or all three. She came in for melancholy. They tried the usual things. Cold baths, rotating chairs, leeches. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She got quiet. She listened. And then she started whispering. Names, dates, warnings, things no one should have known. And after each whisper, someone died. So they took her tongue. Or maybe sewed her lips shut. The stories never agree. Except on the ending. She didn't fight. She didn't beg. She chose the Red Room. Walked into it like a bride crossing the threshold. And they sealed the door behind her. The building changed after that. The air grew heavier. The screaming grew louder. And still, The red room stayed locked. You dream of her. Of course you do. She's taller than she should be. Her hair drips like oil. Her eyes, two dim lanterns glowing through frosted glass. She doesn't speak. She points. At your chest. At your heart. You wake up sobbing, soaked in cold sweat. No idea why. But when you sit up, there's a message carved into the plaster above your bed. Not written. Etched. You didn't put it there. You're listening now. Good. You show the nurse. She scrubs it off with steel wool and disinfectant until the wall bleeds. She won't look you in the eye. She quits 2 days later. You dig through archives. 18th century asylum logs, faded case files, medical Latin. One entry stands out. 1781. Female, unknown name, exhibits profound silence and unsanctioned influence over peers, unresponsive to treatment, disruptive presence. 2 weeks later, she disappears from the ledger. A note, moved to C ward, no access permitted. You stop sleeping. You try not to look at the red room when you pass, but your eyes betray you. And every time they do, you feel it. That same sensation. Not quite fear. Not quite recognition. Something more primal. You are seen. You are known. You are expected. A priest arrives on a Tuesday. Always a bad sign. He doesn't knock. Doesn't speak. Just walks straight into the ward like the floor owes him passage. Like God penciled him in for a private consultation. He's draped in black, head to toe. Cassock starched sharp enough to slice silence. Except the collar, bleached white, flat and rigid, like it was cut from a confession. The staff nod. The patients stare. The air changes. Even the dust seems to freeze mid-float, like the room itself is waiting to see what happens next. He carries nothing but a small satchel and a leather-bound book with no title. Just a faded black cover and a lock that doesn't look decorative. Someone whispers, "We're being blessed." Someone else mutters, "We're being measured." And you? You just feel cold. He starts with the quiet ones. The folded ones. The ones who haven't spoken in months or years or ever. He kneels beside them, whispers something in Latin, not the gentle rosary kind. This is Old Latin. Heavy. Bladed. He touches their foreheads like candles he's testing for flame. Some smile. Some cry. One screams so violently, she tears free from the chair. Bites a nurse hard enough to leave a crescent of blood and memory on the arm. She shouts, "That's not a man. That's not a man." They sedate her. They say she mistook him for the devil. You're not sure she was wrong. By noon, it's your turn. He approaches slowly, like he already knows your worst thought, the one you haven't even had yet. He doesn't ask your name. He just opens the book, begins to read. You don't understand the words, but something in you does. The syllables drag across your bones. They throb behind your eyes. Each word lands like a bell rung inside your ribcage. And for a moment, just a flicker, you want to confess. Everything. Even the things you haven't done. Because his voice makes you believe you've done them all. Welcome to a cure called death. He asks you one question. Just one. Do you want to be free? It's a trap. You know it's a trap. But you nod anyway. He closes the book, places one hand on your shoulder. The other he lifts, palm open, fingers spread, as if to catch something falling. Then let's begin. What follows doesn't feel like a ritual. It feels like a reckoning. He gathers patience in the chapel. What's left of it? Stained glass shattered into wounds of colored light. Altar collapsed like a spine mid-break. But the echo is still there. And something's listening. He begins the exorcism. Yes, a real one. Not symbolic, not metaphor. He chants, He weeps. He commands. He moves up and down the rows like a conductor scoring damnation. Patients scream, laugh, collapse. One howls like a wolf with glass in its throat. You watch from the corner, half-shadowed, wholly unseen. You've never seen faith used like this. Like a knife, like a scalpel, like a lockpick. He reaches a man who insists he's already dead. The priest touches his brow. The man gasps, not in pain, but in relief. I knew I was wrong, he whispers. I knew I was still here. Then he passes out. The room smells of sweat and incense and something beneath it all, something wet and metallic. A woman lights candles. Another vomits. Then someone dies. Third row, middle seat. She was singing seconds ago. Now she slumps, sideways, silent, gone. No twitch, no gasp, just stopped. The priest walks to her, bends down, closes her eyes. She's healed, he says. Software, certain. The staff say nothing. No one moves the body. And the ceremony continues. For how long, you don't know. Time bends during ritual, snaps after. By morning, half the ward is quiet. Not peaceful, not better, just still. Like something was poured into them and hardened. You're different too. You feel it. A static behind your eyes. A low hum in your chest cavity. Like a door opened inside you. And you never asked it to. You hear prayers now. Not from others. From yourself. Your own voice. Praying from somewhere deeper than your throat. You ask your neighbor, is it over? He doesn't look at you. Just murmurs. Depends on who walked out of you. Historians still debate the truth of 18th century asylum exorcisms. Were they therapy? Were they control mechanisms wrapped in ritual? Records speak of chains, holy water, flames, patients restrained in circles of salt. One physician wrote, spiritual affliction mimics melancholia. Better to remove the cause than numb the symptom. No, notes mention what happens after. The woman's body is taken in the night. No announcement, no rite, no name, just gone. The priest doesn't return. But sometimes, when the wind slips through the cracks in the chapel window, you hear chanting, and when you look in the mirror, your reflection mouths something. Before you do. You've heard stories about Paris. Not the one with violins in Versailles. Not the one painted in oils, where powdered wigs sip wine and argue about Rousseau under flickering chandeliers. No, the other Paris. The one buried beneath all that silk and perfume. The Paris of corridors carved from damp stone, where prayers echo off vaulted ceilings, and the enlightenment is just a candle held too close to the dark. You overhear two doctors talking. French accents. One scoffs, the other laughs. You English play at madness, he says. In Paris, we study it. Welcome to Tales from the French Side. A new patient arrives. Fresh from Charenton Asylum, France's most modern institution. If Bedlam is a medieval pit, Charenton is a cathedral of glass observation. Marble floors, high ceilings, sympathy carved into statues. His name is Jean. That's what he says, anyway. He wears gloves indoors. Not for the cold. The cold doesn't bother him. He speaks softly. Too softly. Like he's trying to hear something else beneath the noise of the world. I was a watchmaker, he tells you one afternoon. Now I fix people instead. Then he smiles. Not kindly. They place him 2 cells down. At night, he whispers poetry in French. Not to you. To the rats. You ask him once what Charenton was like. He chuckles. Ah, mon ami. There we use words, not chains. Then he leans closer, voice like wine gone sour. but chains are faster. He tells you about Dr. Philippe Pinel, the revolutionary, the reformer, the man who walked into the asylum during the revolution and removed the chains from the walls. He treated us like people, Jean says, but people can still be caged. He tells you about the therapies. Men strapped into chairs, forced to describe their dreams until their throats closed. Women handed brushes and told to paint their fears, again and again, until their hands blistered. One man was locked in a chamber of mirrors, so he could reflect until he disappeared. It was all elegant, Jean says. Clean, precise, French, music therapy with a string quartet, moral lectures beside fireplaces, velvet curtains, wax-sealed case files. But when the music stopped, silence therapy. Hours, days, weeks. No words, no clocks, no sound at all. Just the room, just the breathing, until patients began to scream just to prove they existed. You ask, was it better than here? Jean shrugs. It's prettier. The corridors are polished. The words are longer. Then he pauses. But here, at least you know you're in hell. You never ask again. Historians praise the French for their humane reforms, unchaining the inmates, eliminating beatings, introducing moral therapy. But the deeper you read, the more twisted it becomes. They spoke of restoring dignity and then tested it. One woman was rewarded for silence with a glass of wine, then punished for singing with a day in solitary. Another was taught politeness by being slapped every time she interrupted. And when none of it worked, the chains came back. Polished, hidden, elegant. Jean begins to change. The whispers stop. Then the conversation. Then everything. One day he sits in silence, staring at the wall, 8 hours, unmoving, unblinking. A keeper finally asks what he's looking at. Jean doesn't turn. The solution, he says. That night you hear him moving. Slow. Rhythmic. In the morning, there's a drawing on his wall. Charcoal. A spiral. But not like the others. This one moves. You swear it moves. A week later, he's gone. Transferred. No one knows where. One nurse says Paris. Another says isolation. But when you pass his cell the next day, the spiral is still there. Fresh. Alive. You wake up with charcoal dust on your fingertips. You didn't draw anything. Did you? You try to argue. Just once. Not loud. Not rude. Just reasonable. Controlled. Human. They brought you the wrong patient's shoes. A size too small. One has a hole chewed in the sole like it's been fed to rats and politely returned. You point this out. Gently. Calmly. You even joke. Offer to show your feet like it's a game, like you're playing along. The orderly listens. He nods, says, "I'll look into it," and walks away like your words were background noise. An hour later, you're on the floor. 2 men pin your arms behind your back like you're a threat. The doctor, the one with the trembling eyelids and the paper-dry lips, the one whose handshake feels like he's measuring bone, leans in and mutters, "You're becoming very vocal lately." But you're not shouting. You're not hostile. You're explaining. Only in this place, explanations echo like accusations. And accusations mean you're unraveling. Here, logic isn't clarity. Logic is a symptom. A red flag flapping in your file. The language of lunacy. You're put in isolation. Diagnosis, excessive articulation. As if words themselves were a form of aggression. So the next day, you try silence. No eye contact, no response. You float like a ghost. You try to vanish behind stillness. A nurse scribbles in her notes, exhibits detachment, withdrawal, possible onset of catatonia or early dementia. You try smiling. displays inappropriate emotional response. You frown. Uncooperative, shows signs of volatile affect. You crack a small joke, just to remind them there's still a person in there. Elevated speech, manic behavior. You cry, not loud, not a scene, just quiet grief. Emotional lability, possible hysterical episode. You try everything, every note in the human scale. There is no right tone, no safe shape. Because in here, every reaction is a symptom. And the absence of reaction? A bigger one. You begin to realize, the more you try to prove your sanity, the more unhinged you appear. Because sane people don't defend their sanity. They don't need to. The act of proving becomes the proof against you. There was a man down the corridor. He was committed for delusions of persecution. He said his own family had him locked away. No one believed him. Then they found the documents, legal, signed, authentic. He was right. But by the time the truth emerged, his diagnosis had calcified. Fixated, paranoid, lost in a narrative of betrayal. Truth becomes hallucination when it's shouted from a padded room. There was a woman, sharp mind, clear eyes. Spent 2 years writing a letter. Every sentence carved with precision. Dates, names, politeness, control. Not a word out of place. The reply came from the magistrate. A well-constructed fabrication, evidence of manipulative psychosis. Here, articulation is suspicion. Coherence is threat. Clarity is cunning. This isn't a hospital. Not really. It's a courtroom, and your guilt is assumed before you ever speak. You test the edges of this maze. One morning, you make no sound. Not a word, not a blink, still as furniture. By nightfall, you're dosed so heavily, your body forgets how to sit up. They call it progress. They mark it as stabilization. Historians still argue whether this system, the logic trap, was designed on purpose, or whether it simply emerged from the cruel arithmetic of ignorance and authority. A few yellow documents refer to it as the circular defense model. If you resist treatment, you're unstable. If you accept it, you are unstable to begin with. If you question either, you're obsessively fixated. A keeper once joked, wiping his hands on his coat. It's like arguing with fog. The more you move, the more it wraps around you. But it doesn't feel like fog. It feels like drowning in air. And no one notices because you're still breathing. Worse, you're beginning to notice something terrifying. Not madness, something quieter. Suspicion. Of yourself. You pause mid-sentence and ask, did I say too much? You reread what you wrote and wonder, is this too polished? Too cold? Too deliberate? You see yourself in the mirror, and you flinch. Not because of your reflection, but because you don't know whether that face still believes you. Still trusts your version of events. You're splitting. Slowly. Silently. One night, the man in the bed beside you whispers, they don't need to break you. They just confuse you until you don't know what you are. You ask him, how do you stop it? He smiles with cracked lips. You don't. You just choose the version of you that hurts the least. In the common room, there's a chalkboard, a cheerful little thing. Every morning, in bright blue letters, it reads, recovery begins with trust. And you laugh now, you try not to, but you do. Because trust in here is a trapdoor. Trust is letting them rename your memories until even you don't recognize them. It's handing over your diary and praying they don't read it like evidence. They want compliance, not insight. Peace, not clarity. You could describe the sky, name every star by its Latin root, and they'd call it delusion. So you stop. You say less. You tilt your head. You smile, but not too wide. You walk the fine line of not too sane, not too strange. A performance so subtle it exhausts you. And still, they watch. Like you're a mirror that might suddenly crack. Because the truth is, you're losing the argument. Not with them, with the voice inside that once knew you were real. It starts with a candle that won't stay lit. Every night, the flame outside Ward C sputters. It gasps, then dies. They blame drafts, bad wax, humidity in the old walls. They invent theories faster than they fix the wiring. But no one volunteers to relight it. The hallway there is colder, not seasonally, intrinsically. A cold that belongs there. You're told to avoid it. Not forbidden, no, just discouraged. The way someone might say, don't look directly at the sun, or don't ask where the blood went. Which, of course, makes it irresistible. One evening, you're sent on mop duty. The kind they reserve for the well-behaved. The stabilizing. The ones who no longer scream during injections. A reward. Or a test. You take the long way. Not because you have to. Because something in you wants to look. Past Ward A. Past the supply closet that hums at night. Past the bend where the shadows move before the lights flicker. Then, Ward C. The door is ajar. Inside, pitch black. A darkness that doesn't simply lack light. It rejects it. And something is watching. You step forward, not with courage, just gravity. The air changes. It brushes the back of your neck like an exhale with intention. You feel it in your fillings, your bones, your spine. Then the cold hits. Not the surface cold of winter. This one sinks deeper. It smells of stone and iron and old, wet paper. The kind of cold that remembers. You whisper, hello. And a voice, not loud, not menacing, just impossibly close, replies, about time. No one told you there was a ghost. But it's not what you expected. No chains, no glowing silhouette. It doesn't rattle, it doesn't float. It listens. You don't hear it speak. You hear your own thoughts bouncing back to you, altered, rearranged, tinted with meaning you didn't put there. Like someone editing your mind while you think. You back away, carefully, because something in you knows running would make it follow. A week later, they send someone else. A new patient, loud, the kind that thinks he can joke his way out of padded rooms. He laughs about the candle, calls it superstition. The next morning, he's curled in the corner of his room, rocking, silent. Won't eat, won't blink, won't say what happened. But that night, he draws on the wall. A face. Your face. They move him to the cellar. They don't ask questions. They just lower the lights. And the whispers begin. Some patients say the thing in Ward C is a former inmate, a man buried too long in silence, a soul baked into the brickwork. Others say it's not a person at all. It's the building itself, sentient, hungry, remembering. One story claims it's a keeper who tried to help someone escape. Another, more quietly, suggests it's a god, old and starved, buried in the foundation when the asylum was built. The official reports? Empty. No Ward C, no incidents, no notes on candles that die or drawings that appear. But the staff, they avoid that hall now. Even the bold ones, even the cruel ones. And the priest, the one who caused the exorcism 2 wings over, crosses himself when he passes by. He never used to. That's when you understand. This place has layers. You're not just surviving the therapy, the pills, the false smiles. You're surviving the architecture, the memory of the building itself. The nights shift after that. You wake up to frost on your blanket, and it's not winter. There are no open windows. You hear breathing in your pillow, but it's not yours. The rhythm is wrong. Slower, hungrier. The spiral symbols, the ones they scrubbed last month, return, this time in soot. On the ceiling, Above your bed, Clarence, your confidant, the wall that always echoed back your knocks, goes quiet. You tap, nothing. You ask a nurse about Ward C. She stares blankly. We don't have a Ward C, but you saw it. You felt it. The air, the voice, the handwriting. So you go back. No mop, no candle. Just your breath and the thud of your steps against title that feels older than memory. The door is open again. Inside, empty. Except for one thing. A chair in the corner, facing the wall. And scratched into the stone, jagged and deep. You were here before. Your hands begin to tremble. Because the handwriting, it's yours. And you don't remember writing it. You didn't dream it. You didn't imagine it. You just don't remember. Historians write about the medicine, the treatments, the staff shortages. They log symptoms and survival rates. They count beds, measure dosages. But this part doesn't make it into the reports. There are no files labeled haunting, no forms for unexplained frost, or voices in mirrors, or the slow erosion of personal identity. But every asylum has a Ward C, a place where the line between thought and reality dissolves, where the building dreams, where the air watches you back. You return to your cell, lie down, try to sleep, but from deep beneath the floor, deeper than basements go, beneath the stone and the rot and the buried years, you hear a whisper. Next time, don't forget me. And for the first time, you wonder, what if you already have? There's talk in the ward today. Not whispers, not mutterings behind hands or under breath. Talk. Full sentences. Eyes meeting. Tones not dulled by medication or fatigue. A kind of electricity runs under it. Cautious, aching, too bright to hold directly. Someone, they say his name is Thomas, or Edward, or maybe something else entirely. Names slip loose in here like teeth from a dying mouth, is being released. Not transferred, not reassigned, not quietly removed at 3 a.m. and never mentioned again. Released. The word lands heavy, unfamiliar, unreal. Someone swears they saw him sign a form with a real pen. Someone else says he shook a doctor's hand, not stiffly, not in fear, but with dignity. And the wildest part? A patient claims he smiled, really smiled. Not that broken grimace people practice in mirrors, not the kind of smile you use to pass the evaluations. A smile with hope in it. You can't remember the last time you saw that. A smile that meant something, and it spreads. Not like rumor, like fire. The idea, the possibility, the infection of it. That escape is real. That freedom has form. That this place might have an exit that doesn't involve a morgue tag or a missing file. But then, the other stories start. Soft at first, then sharper. Release is a myth. You ask around, not openly, not too loud, just enough to test the edges. One nurse, the one with hands too steady, too clean, shrugs. It happens sometimes, she says. But her eyes don't say when, or how, or what someone must do, or become, to earn it. Another one, older, with tremors in his voice even when he's silent, says, if you're lucky, they sign you out. If you're really lucky, they don't take your name with them. You ask what that means. He just taps his temple twice. They change it here, he says. Even if your body leaves. You think of the man who once claimed he'd walked out, swore he lived in a cottage now, grew carrots, had a wife who laughed with her whole face. 2 days later, they found him clawing at the stone floor with a spoon. He thought he was still outside. Said the moon looked wrong. Said the grass had no smell. Said everything tasted like memory. There's another story. A patient swore his sister came, hugged him, signed the forms. His bag was packed. even waved goodbye. The next morning, he was still in his bed. When he asked what happened, the staff told him, "You don't have a sister." He forgot his name within the week, stopped answering to anything at all. Eventually, they just called him Room 5. You start to wonder, what is release? Is it walking through the front doors? Is it forgetting the walls? Or is it being scrubbed so thoroughly of who you were that the asylum no longer recognizes you? Is release just the absence of grip? One patient stopped responding to his name altogether, wouldn't speak, wouldn't blink when addressed. He waited, still as a question. Then one day, a keeper came in and said, "You're ready." He stood. No shoes, no bag, just walked out. All he carried was a folded slip of paper. It read, "Null." That's not a name. That's erasure. Historians have records of discharges, when they're lucky enough to find any. But the deeper you dig, the stranger it gets. Files with blank addresses, no family records, some with photos smudged beyond use, others with notes in Latin, scribbled like afterthoughts. One case from 1787 says, "Patient successfully exited. Location, N.A." Another file, handwritten in meticulous script, described the discharge as voluntary fragmentation. What does that even mean? Voluntary. For whom? You think of Jean, the French patient with the tremor in his left hand. He used to recite Baudelaire from memory. One day he vanished. Did he leave? Was he moved? Was he repurposed? You think of Margaret, the girl in the red room. Her voice could cut silence like glass. Then one day, the red room was empty, and no one mentioned her again. Were they freed? Or did something else happen? One patient, an old man with eyes like wet ash, tells you softly, "Release isn't the door opening. It's the room forgetting you were ever there." And that sticks. That sentence feels like a nail hammered directly into your spine. That evening, you sit in the courtyard. The sky is its usual color, bruised concrete. The trees don't move unless watched. But for a moment, something shifts. A breeze. The faint scent of leaves. Maybe. Or memory. You let your eyes close. And for one impossible breath, you imagine you're elsewhere. Healed. Whole. Free. Your name has weight again. You speak it aloud in your mind, and it doesn't crack or blur. But then a keeper passes by, wearing your old shoes. The ones you argued about. The ones they said didn't matter. They fit someone else now. You ask your neighbor, "How do you know when it's real? When it's actually happening?" He tilts his head. "You don't," he says. "You just stop asking." And that's worse than any answer. Later that night, as you lift your pillow, something crinkles beneath it. A note. Folded, yellowed, torn at the edges. 4 words scratched in haste. "If you get out, run." You flip it over. No signature. No date. No handwriting to match against. Just silence and a chill. Someone left it for you. Or for themselves. Or for the version of you that might one day forget what this place really is. The note lingers in your hand like a fragment of something real, something dangerous. Because maybe, just maybe, the door does open. But the price never leaves. You never expected to return here. Not to the ward, you never left that. But to this moment, this version of yourself. The one standing in the same hall you first entered, staring at the door that once swallowed you whole. The iron hinges are the same. The floor creaks in the same rhythm. But something's changed. You, your name, if you still remember it, doesn't feel like a fact anymore. Just a whisper, a rumor, a thing the asylum almost took. And now someone else arrives. New, clean, scared. You see it in their shoulders, in the way they breathe, like every inhale might be their last as a person and their first as an inmate. And in that moment, as they're led down the hall, eyes wide, footsteps slow, you realize the terrible truth. You're not leaving. Not really. Because you came here to be protected, or maybe punished, or maybe just hidden. And now, you're part of the system. The doors swing closed again. The newest patient walks past. You nod. They flinch. You want to say, it gets easier, but that would be a lie. You want to say, stay quiet, but silence can be misdiagnosed. You want to say, don't let them take your mind, but the walls already echo with the ghosts of those who tried. So instead you say nothing. The way the smart ones do, the way the broken ones do, the way you do. A nurse greets the new arrival with forced cheer. You'll feel better here. It's the same line they said to you, and to Margaret, and to the general, and to the woman in the red room. You watch them disappear down the hallway, swallowed by the same stone jaws that chewed through your identity. You turn back to your cell. No, your room. That's what you call it now. A keeper once said it helps with the illusion of dignity. The bed is still stiff. Clarence, your wall has grown quiet again, but you still nod to him before lying down. Out of habit? Or superstition? Or love? You remember the things that made you laugh once. You remember the experiments, the chains, the visits. You remember arguing too logically and being punished for it. You remember trying not to scream so they wouldn't think you were mad, and realizing that not screaming made them more certain. You remember her? The voice from Ward C. And you wonder if she remembers you. In the hall, someone sings a lullaby out of tune. A young man sobs into a spoon. An old patient paints a tree on the floor in spit. And life continues. Not living, just the echo of it. The building hums. You wonder if it hums your name now. You press your ear to the wall and listen. Not for escape, not for rescue, just for memory. Because if the asylum forgets you, if you vanish without a mark, then who were you really? So you scratch one more line into the wall, right beneath the spiral. It simply says, I was here. I saw everything. And for a moment, that's enough, because madness is a cycle, and survival here is an act of quiet rebellion. The door swings closed again, and someone else steps through, just like you did, just like they will, again, and again, and again. The building breathes slower now. You do too. The torchlight is softer tonight, casting long amber shadows across the stones, like ribbons that forgot how to flutter. The screaming has settled into a distant murmur, like wind in a faraway forest. It's quiet. Not empty, not safe. Just quiet. You lie on the stiff mattress, arms folded over your chest, the straw beneath you rustling with every shift. The chill has grown familiar, like a hand you stopped minding on your shoulder. Somewhere down the corridor, a spoon drops, a chair creaks, a voice hums just out of tune. But here in this moment, you're still. You're not remembering everything, not all the trauma, not all the people who vanished without goodbye, just flashes. Margaret's lullaby, Jean's spirals, the scratching from beneath the floorboards, Clarence, your faithful wall, now covered in the hieroglyphs of your slow undoing. You trace a mark with your fingertip. You don't even remember carving this one. A circle, a door, maybe both. You take a breath, deep and slow. And for the first time in longer than you care to measure, you feel something almost like peace. Not because you're free, not because you're healed, but because you understand. This place didn't erase you, not entirely. You survived the chair that spun you. You survived the watchers, the whispers, the ice baths, the cures. You survived the silence, You survived yourself. And here you are, still thinking, still being. The asylum doesn't get to claim your last breath because it never learned your last thought. You wonder what the outside world looks like now. Is it morning? Is it raining? Is someone somewhere asking about you? Reading your name in a letter? Whispering it in sleep? Maybe. Or maybe your name has changed form, become a story, a ghost, a rumor scratched into someone else's wall. And maybe that's enough. So you close your eyes. The blanket, still thin, feels a little warmer. The air, still sour, feels a little softer. The madness is still here, hanging in the rafters, crouched in the corners. But tonight, it leaves you alone. Because it knows you now, and it respects you. Not as a patient, but as a fellow ghost. So breathe. Let the stones hold you. Let the silence welcome you. Let the dream begin.